All right, here we go with a little more mere mortal dev. Today I want to show you something that I was noodling around with over the summer. I wrote a couple of blog posts about it, but instead of just kind of walking you through that, let's actually look at the code instead. This is all about how to set up a RAG system in a really super easy way inside of Node.js. So I came across this library, and this is just something that I think is worth, kind of kicking the tires on. But there's a lot of, options out there today for us to try different, kind of like RAG systems locally in our code. But this is the one I happen to be playing with because I think that, at least as a starter, it gets you just into the surface level pretty easily. And then from there, if you're starting to learn the particulars of RAG systems and how to set them up, you'll start to kind of see, here are the different levers I could be playing with. And as you form opinions, perhaps this will be the library you use, but you'll have perhaps more informed opinions as well about why you might not want to use this one and instead go with other options. So for me personally, I'm still in the exploration phase, and I think this is actually a great time just to walk you through what I've been doing so far. So this here is the repo itself, and you can see it's a Node.js RAG framework for easily working with LLMs and embeddings. So, the basic sort of getting started in the README kind of boils down to what is a builder pattern in the JavaScript, right? So this is a pattern we sometimes see in JavaScript, and certainly I've seen it a lot in Java, where you kind of instantiate a new class and then start calling functions on it, and then finally at the end call a build method. So you can see that just from this alone, you could probably get pretty interesting results. So I wanted just to kind of run through kind of what I've been doing at the code level and share a repo with you, so maybe you can try it out as well and maybe skip a few steps. So I have this repo over here that shows you how to do just like the most basic setup. But what I think we'll actually do instead is just jump straight into the code. So I'm going to go over here to this RAG repo. This is the same repo that I just showed you, except I've started it out in a pretty basic state for the purpose of this video. So without going into everything else the code is doing, you can see here that, just to give you a little bit of relief, like this is 135 lines of code-ish in one single file. So it's not like we're skipping a bunch of complexity, but I just wanted to get down to the core of this main function that I created. So this is the main function. When we run npm start to run the script, it's going to execute the RAG query. Let's just go line by line real quick and just kind of see what we're looking at here. So first of all, we're going to instantiate the RAG application. And there's a bunch of stuff under the hood here. I created a little helper function called getRagApplication. We'll have a look at that in a little bit, but you can imagine that it contains that builder that I just showed you a minute ago. But we don't need to get into the weeds of that just yet. Next up, we're going to add a RAG application loader, and this is a concept or a construct that's part of the EmbedJS library. So kind of just start to add loaders here, and you can do this as part of the builder. The way I've set the script up, it doesn't make sense to do that, and in most cases I kind of suspect you won't want to have your loaders just as part of the builder unless you're doing like the most basic of setups. So anyways, you have a lot of different options of what kind of loaders you can use. I tend to favor the web loader just because like it's pretty cool to be able to like throw in a URL and or content, as the case may be. I suppose you can just add regular strings here too. I haven't played around with the content side, but on the URL side, you can just point this RAG application to a URL, and it's gonna take all that stuff in. So you got that. Then I've created a little helper function to get the prompt. Again, that's just for, to make it easier to get started. So no worries there. It's just JavaScript, nothing to do really with LLMs at all. And then after that, we're going to prompt the RAG application with another helper method. So I'm passing in, again, this is just something a little construct I made up that is the RAG application, and then you pass in the prompt, and you can imagine that inside of that function, it's passing the prompt to the RAG application. And we'll have a look at that in a second, but I just wanted to kind of show you that at the very end, we're going to print the RAG output. So what I have done is to set this up in a way where if we don't pass any specific prompt from the command line, then if we run npm start, it's just going to ask, what does Ash write about? Just to give us like the most easiest of starting points. So in this case, we've got my website. So let's run npm start, and if all goes well, things will work. Says it's prompting with what does Ash write about, and then you can see here that the RAG output is that Ash writes about a variety of topics, including AI, Node.js, JavaScript, DevRel, Rust. Do I write about Rust? I'm not sure. I can't remember if I've ever written about Rust, but that's a good thing to go back and do some fact checking on. And then community events. So anyways, you can see that with very little setup, we got something pretty cool going here, even if it's not necessarily like 100% accurate. But there is a possibility I've written about Rust and I just don't remember. That's totally a thing that might have happened. So anyways, this is doing is reading from the front page of my website. There is a different kind of loader that EmbedJS provides where you can actually give it a sitemap, and obviously that's going to be like a lot more interesting in terms of the results you can get, because it'll go through and like pull in presumably anything in that sitemap. I haven't played around with that one too much yet, but that's one of the examples that's included in the README of EmbedJS. So if you want to play around with that, that's definitely a promising one if what you're trying to do is talk to your content on your website. Okay, cool. So my primary question when I got started with this library was, okay, this is all well and good, but the README showed me exactly how to add one website or one sitemap into as a load, how to load it into the RAG application. So probably I want to load more than one read source. So I started kind of noodling around with that too, asked some questions on the GitHub repo. This was probably back in June or July, so it was a few months ago at this stage. And I think it was early days for the repo. It wasn't transparently documented how to do that, but the maintainers were nice enough to jump in and answer some questions for me. So what I want to do is show you, instead of kind of this basic thing, which you could easily get from the README, instead I'm going to show you how to add multiple resources and then query those. So let's see here. Before we jump into that, though, I said that I'd take you through like what some of these helper functions are doing. And I think this is a good time to do that before we get into loading multiple resources. So we'll go up to get RAG application. And again, you can imagine that all this function is doing is returning the results of the builder. And so let's see, we'll go all the way up here to this function. So try to do what we can to be verbose, just to give you an idea of what's going on under the hood. So you can see here it was getting the RAG application, and assuming that has been successful, then you're going to get a console log that says built application with whatever model name, right? So in this case, you can see I'm using GPT 3.5 Turbo from OpenAI, but it's really like the meat of the whole thing here is this, which is almost verbatim what you can find in the README of EmbedJS. So we're instantiating a new RAG application builder. We set the model, and use the constants that the library recognizes. So I'm just using 3.5 Turbo, and then an embedding model, vector DB, and cache. And these different setters that we're calling on the builder is where some of the fun begins in terms of like, what are you going to do in terms of setting up your RAG application. What I wanted to do to keep this stuff as incredibly simple as possible was set up everything in memory. So this vector DB is in memory. The cache is, it says it on the tin, it's in memory, right? We're using memory cache. But the repo itself like actually has like just a ton of different things that it lists that are options that you can use. So let's just take a quick look. I won't go through them. Really won't go through them all, but I just want to give you an idea. So You can see like setting things like temperature and stuff. Yeah. Here we go. Loaders supported. So those are the loaders. These are the LLMs, and then we get to the embedding models. Vector database is supported in caches. So this is the part I wanted to show you. If you pick some of these other ones that are not in memory, my experience with them so far has been that EmbedJS builds that vector database for you on the fly as well as the cache. So, again, like something worth playing around with. I haven't touched conversation history yet, but there's stuff to be done there too. I almost feel like this might not have been there when I was playing with it before, but I could be wrong. The cool thing is you've got a gajillion options, and my understanding is they also take new integrations with other databases, caches, and the like. But even before that, you can see that there's just a ton of support for different LLMs and different embedding models. I think the fun bit here is looking at what loaders are supported. So like we mentioned earlier, sitemap, and we have had a look at webpage, which I believe is the web loader. But you can add your own custom loaders. You can do CSVs or JSON, apparently YouTube videos as well, and channels. So a lot of stuff that you could be playing with that, for this basic demo, we're not going to get into. So anyways, coming back to the script here, we have the get rag application helper function. I just put this here as a matter of simplicity so that when we read the main function, when the script is executed, it's just easier to see what's going on. You don't necessarily have to wrap this in your own function if you don't want to, though. So all this is doing is, you can see, building the rag application and then returning it. Nothing crazy. Remember that a lot of this stuff is asynchronous, so you're going to have to await the promise and only return it once the promise is resolved, and make sure that your functions, if you're wrapping them, are in async. Okay, cool. So that's the first step of our main function here. And then after that, there's going to be another function we'll call in a second when I show you how to load multiple resources. But for now, you can just see that I'm just basically adding a loader on top of the rag application here. We'll do this a bit more dynamically in just a moment. Get prompt probably won't spend a ton of time looking into this one, but it's basically, let's see if I can find, here we are. This is just plain old JavaScript. In Node.js, it looks to see if there's a command line argument, which would be the prompt, so you can just pass the question in as a string in the command line. And if there's nothing there, then it defaults to this. Again, obviously this isn't like an application you're going to run or anything. I just wanted to have a default so that you're not immediately greeted with no prompt and it's erroring out. So it gets the prompt and returns the prompt, right? So it's just getting a string. Next up, it's taking both that rag application that we set up over here in main and the prompt. So it's just passing the rag app and the string to a function called prompt rag, which again, you can probably imagine what it's doing. But again, this comes back to using EmbedJS. So again, asynchronously, we're going to call this function so that it can in turn call this one-liner, right? I've wrapped the prompt rag. I've made this little helper function, but the reality is like querying the rag application is basically a one-liner. So you await rag application.query and then pass in your prompt. You're just passing in a string. And then the response is returned. So, we could, if we wanted to just have all this straight in line, we could do something like this as well. Await rag application dot query, and then, I don't know, pass in whatever string might be relevant as the query. I like wrapping these things just to, again, make the main function or the entry point just a bit more readable. Cool. So the prompt is returned, and then after that, the rag response is, so once the, let me remind myself what I did here. So I think this is mostly about formatting. So prompt rag. All right, no, sorry. This is where we prompted. Okay, great. And then this is the one that's about formatting. So we have the rag response here, and then we're just going to print it out. I made my own little printer function. It's print rag output. Again, this is just going to be plain old JavaScript, and the whole idea here is just to kind of like show bit by bit, first what the rag output was, so, which you can see down here, right? The rag output. And then it shows output.result, which is all the stuff that came back from the LLM, and then or from the rag system, and then sourced from. In this case, like there's only one option, right? It was just sourced from ashryan.io because that's the only source we gave it. Cool. So we've gone through this whole thing, and just to say it succinctly one more time, we instantiate the rag application, we load content into it. Then we set up our prompt, we prompt the rag application, and then we print the results. Essentially what you would expect from any sort of like basic kind of setup for something like this. What we're going to do next is actually, so we'll get rid of this sort of like most basic of let's just toss a loader in on top. And I have some code that I've prepared here because this was already in the repo. So if you go grab the repo, this is actually what you're going to get. Let me throw it in here. We'll uncomment it and talk a little bit about what it's going to do. Okay. So this one instead is going to, this part of the code is actually going to use a different helper function. Sorry, getlens is a thing I should turn off before I stream, I think. So this load resources is another helper function that I created. We're going to pass in the rag application and data URLs. Okay, what are data URLs? Well, this summer I was in Berlin, and I had some meetups that I thought I wanted to go potentially check out, but it was a lot of stuff to read. And so I just kind of tossed it into this rag system to see, without any sort of major setup, like, can I get something out of this? Like, is there something where I can say, hey, are there any running meetups that are happening while I'm there? Or, where can I go, learn more about JavaScript or AI or something like that? So I just grabbed all these data URLs after doing some searching around on meetup.com. And so what we're going to do, if we come back to our main function, is we're going to load those resources, right? So we're passing in the rag application and the data URLs, and we're going to get back loader summaries. So let's go have a look at load resources. Here we are. This one's a bit more meaty because we actually need to go through that entire array of URLs as strings and load them in. So some of the stuff is just like boilerplate, let's handle promises in JavaScript type situation. So we're awaiting a promise.all where we map through all the data URLs and we say, hey, we're adding a loader for this one and that one through as we map through. Each one is going to offer up a loader summary. So we didn't do this before, but when we loaded my website in that one-liner inside of main earlier, we could capture a return value that I'm calling loader summary here. I'll say that in EmbedJS, I'm not 1,000% sure that these are necessarily meant to be used for anything in particular, but what I like about it is that we can count them and then figure out, did we get a positive load, yes or no, from each URL. So anyways, we're in the we're mapping over data URLs. We load each one, we get a loader summary, and then we pass that in. So ultimately what happens if you unroll all of this back up to promise.all is each one of these loader summaries will be a resolved promise for loading that particular URL. Hopefully that was clear. But after that, what we're going to do is just give a general sort of like, hey, here's what just happened from an overall point of view. So you can see there's a lot of console logs in here. The point being, I'm trying to show you step by step when the script runs, what's going on. So you'll get like a general result as well as a one by one status of what's going on when we're adding the loaders. Cool. So this function returns that array of loader summaries. So let's pop back down to main. So that's what this one line is doing, right? Get the RAG application, and then in this line that we're now using, we use the helper function called load resources, pass in the RAG app and data URLs, and we're going to get back an array of loader summaries. So here, oh, and I'm realizing I need to get rid of this too because this will now be redundant. Okay, cool. So here what we're going to do is have a little bit of logic just to see that, one, did loader summaries come back with anything? And are there as many loader summaries as there were data URLs? I don't actually know what the best practice will end up being for EmbedJS specifically on checking this, but what I'm hoping to accomplish with this is, one, like, if we didn't get back loader summaries at all, well, that's obviously a problem and we should alert the user to that. My guess is this could actually always end up being true. And so this is something that I think is probably something to dig into with the maintainers of the library if before trying to lean on this and to, for any real workload. Okay, so anyways, we're doing the light logic check just to see, like, okay, instead of just trusting that the loading happened, let's kind of see if there's some sort of sign of life here. And if there is, then we'll do all the stuff we did before. Get the prompt the RAG, print the output. Okay, so let's go ahead and save the file here, and then I'm going to run this one more time. So we're going to do npm start, and this time let's ask a question. Are there any events about JavaScript happening? So it's adding all the loaders, it's prompting. Okay, so here we go. I want to go back from the start just to show you the progress real quick, and then we'll see from there. So you can see that it starts out by printing, getting the RAG application. It updates you with what model's being used. It shows you line by line that each one of these URLs are being added. And then you can see here that the loader summaries, again, how these are intended to be used by the maintainers is not yet 100% clear to me. But when you do load something, you get back that return value that we're using here in line 127. So entries added, you get some form of it, you get a unique ID that's prepended with the type of loader, but you also get a loader type as well. And so, yeah, you get to see all that kind of stuff printed out line by line. And then it says that, here's what we're prompting with, and here's the output. Okay, so it looks like this didn't really turn up too much, so let's see. And by the way, this is where you get into the fun of all those other levers to pull that we talked about earlier. How you're setting up your database and your cache, and which loaders you're using, and all that kind of stuff is where you kind of get into the fun of, like, how do you actually set this stuff up. So let's see if we can get a positive response here. Let's try running meetups and see what happens. Okay, it says you don't have that information. It is entirely possible that in the time that I've written this script that Meetup has changed the robots.txt. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So, a couple of months ago when I was running the script, though, you could see that it would actually give you some event details. I'll try one more time just to see, and from that, we may just call it. So what kind of meetups are happening in Berlin in July, which is when all these meetups were happening? Yeah, it doesn't have that information. So I'm going to take a guess here and just say that there's an entirely likely scenario that you can't just access this stuff through URL, essentially scraping it from meetup.com anymore. And that's one of the interesting sort of cat and mouse games that we'll all end up playing with some of this stuff too. what I might try to do as a next step is actually just grab a number of URLs from things I know I can scrape, like my website, and then we can kind of have another look at that and see if we can prompt the RAG system with something that returns specific results, not only just from my homepage, but from the different posts that I've put on there. So anyways, as you can see, it's kind of early days, even for me, like digging into the stuff, and what worked a couple of months ago is not necessarily returning the same results. But I'd say that either way, if you're just starting to dig into RAG and kind of starting to learn a bit about like, well, I don't know, like what's the cache for? Which vector DB should I pick? Do I need one? Embedding model versus model itself. Like, what should I be thinking about when I choose those? I think this little builder construct is actually a super interesting way to dig in and start kind of learning that kind of thing. So anyways, I hope this was somewhat useful for you. And I want to go back to the browser for just a second and remind you that what we're looking at here is EmbedJS. So if you go to github.com/llm-tools/embedjs, you can find that. And then I have this repo here if you're interested in looking at it. It's the same code that we just had a look at. And you can pick it up and run it. Again, it's going to need some form of mending since something seems to have changed since I was last scraping this stuff. But it does go into some level of detail about like how to get set up and all of that kind of thing. And then there are actually some blog posts on my website about this library as well. So if you do go to ashryan.io, a couple of blog posts that could be worth looking at. This is the first one that I wrote, RAG in Node.js with EmbedJS. So this was back in June. And then there's another one that was a few weeks later in July that answers a question that I sort of posed in the first blog post. And that was all about, dynamically coming back and loading resources from, say, like an array or something like that. So anyways, hope you get some use out of this, and sure would love to hear from you if you have any ideas on, how you prefer to set up RAG systems for these kind of very basic, like, local use cases. Thanks for watching.